Good day, everybody. This is Susan Elliott, author of Me Lady Talking Podcast. And today I'm starting the first installment of dealing with a personality disordered ex. Either you're divorcing them or you're co-parenting with them. And this is going to be the first. I have 5 installments planned. This is the first one. And at the end of each installment, this was no different. I'm going to try to give a few helpful hints of how to deal with some of the crazy things that they do. But what it would really be good is if you could write to me and let me know if you have any specific situations in your divorce or co-parenting that you would find helpful. And I will address them. Like I said, I have 5 installments planned. So I hope that I can address everybody's concerns and issues in these 5 installments, and I'll make it more than that if I have to. But this is the first one. I hope it helps somebody. And please, please, please feel free to give me a shout and let me know what you think, and let me know if there's any questions I can answer for you. Enjoy all. Take care.
Welcome to the Mean Lady Talking Podcast. This is the podcast that tackles tough questions about relationships, life, love, and loss. It may not be the advice you want, but is probably the advice you need. And now here's your host, grief therapist, motivational speaker, relationship expert, best-selling author, and attorney, the not really mean lady herself, Susan J. Elliott.
Good day, everybody. This is Susan Elliott, host of Mean Lady Talking Podcast, and today we have a very special podcast. Before I begin today's podcast, I want to give you a little bit of history. One night I was watching a very distressing episode on the Scientology series that Leah Remini did, and it was one of the episodes where these young women were talking about being raped, and I said in my tweet, Scientology is nothing more than organized mental illness. And Leah Remini retweeted my tweet. And the way I've described this episode in my life is then all hell broke loose. People who didn't like her and were trolling her came after me. And I had said in one of my tweets that I was a former psychiatric clinician. And they said, former means you got fired. And they were basically harassing me, insulting me, calling me names. And I said, no, it doesn't mean I got fired. It means that I left the field and went to law school. They said, well, clinician does nothing more than bring doctors coffee. And I said, what do you know? They all sounded like a bunch of idiots. I was very emotionally charged about this episode that I was watching. I was practicing law during the day. I was doing some counseling at night. I had just come from a very distressing mediation that I had agreed to consult in that had domestic violence as one of the issues. And I really didn't think they belonged in mediation because I really thought that the abuser was completely mentally unfit to sit through mediation. And then I came and I was watching this very upsetting show. I tweeted that to my followers, and then Leah Remini retweeted me, and then these people basically came after me. And I was so frustrated and so upset because of not only how my day had gone, but the fact that these people were attacking me for no good reason. I didn't know who they were. I didn't know why they were coming after me. And as street smart and book smart and worldly as I can be at times, this was a night where I was just home alone. I was watching TV, and I really was exasperated. By the time I left work the next day, these cretins had sent some of my real tweets to Psychology Today and my boss and the New York Bar and my publisher and all kinds of people. And at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and I don't check my personal email during the day when I'm working on a legal project or a case or if I'm on a job. I know that most people do, but I don't. It's just an act of self-discipline. I tell everyone who knows me, if you email me during the day, most likely you're not going to get a response from me until 6, 7 o'clock at night. If I'm working in a firm, if I'm working in court, if I'm working on a case, if I'm doing a mediation, whatever it is. So I checked my mail at 6 o'clock at night and found that I had been unceremoniously fired from Psychology Today based on not just my real tweets, but these doctor tweets. I immediately wrote to them and said, first of all, I couldn't believe that they were doing this. I couldn't believe that they were taking the side of some people that they didn't even know. Anybody else that these people have tried to contact, and right now I have a list of who most of these people are. The main guy seems to be the 71-year-old kook in Ohio who doesn't like me, doesn't like Leah Remini. And then they wrote this dark web page about me, this real hate site page, and Leah and I are now besties according to them. And the guy in Ohio, I wrote about this on my blog, and I quoted some of the things that they said about me, this disgusting, misogynistic, pathological, nasty stuff they wrote about me, because I don't even know why. Because Leah Remini retweeted one of my tweets. Like, that's how this all started. And then because I was exasperated with them attacking me and I called them idiots, so they made this horrible, terrible page about me, and I quoted it to show on my blog page what I was writing about, to show these are the nasty cyberbullies that Psychology Today took the side of. Then they wrote my boss and said that I was guilty of plagiarism because I didn't give them credit. Now, the legal definition of plagiarism is when you lift somebody else's work and try to pass it off as your own. So I obviously wasn't trying to take this hate site's insulting diatribe against me as my own. So the plagiarism thing failed, but what it did do is it poked the bear. Whenever you go after somebody and you think you're being cute and smart and funny, if they're leaving you alone, you better figure out at what point you need to leave well enough alone. As a published author who cites all of my sources and goes nuts to make sure that whenever I quote somebody, I always research to make sure I got the right quote. For them to accuse me of plagiarism, even though they spelled it wrong, even though it wasn't anything of the sort, I went after them. I hired a private investigator. I found out who the people were. I found out that the one person that this 71-year-old lunatic in Ohio was saying that this other person that I insulted was a child. And that was supposedly one of the things that he sent to Psychology Today, which was a blatant lie. Because first of all, why is a child up at night watching something in Scientology and attacking me? So he told everybody that I was attacking children. And there was this thing about some minister who was accused of pedophilia. And I had also commented on that on Twitter. So this guy turns it into, oh, she accuses all of our religious leaders of being pedophiles, which is not what I said at all. And then if you'll notice on my blog, I have something called the Recruiter Story, because this guy also wrote to my boss, which I don't even know how you think that you are so important that you have to try to wreck the life of somebody you don't know who's never done anything to you personally. I don't even get it. But if you're going to do it on the truth, not on lies. So he said that I told a great lie about being raped by an army recruiter, which is not the story at all. So I put the actual story on my blog. I'm just like done with this guy. And I looked into defamation, which is absolutely actionable. I can actually own everything he has with the things that he has said about me, because the only defense he would have is the truth, and nothing he has said about me is the truth. So everything that he says about me, I can dispute with factual evidence. And I hired a private investigator. I found out who he was. I found out a few other things about a few other people. And the private investigator had me send the information to the FBI, because cyber stalking, cyberbullying, and defamation is a crime, and you're not allowed to do it. It's like you're not allowed to do it across state lines. So now you're invoking federal jurisdiction. And as a lawyer who's licensed in federal court. I can sue him in the Southern District of New York, and I will do it in a heartbeat. I love practicing in the Southern District of New York. Anyway, Psychology Today, when I wrote them a letter, I wrote them like a 10-page letter explaining all of everything I just told you. I explained to them. And I said, because I now have monetary damages, even though I didn't make a lot of money with Psychology Today, I made some money. So because he harmed me financially, I now have damages, which is one of the things that you need to have for a lawsuit. So I wrote Psychology Today and I said, forward this on to your legal department, because now that you have basically taken away my position, I now have monetary damages. So it's better to sue him with. Even if it was a penny, I would sue him. Once they got a hold of that, even though they assured me that they would keep my articles up, and even though the editor-in-chief said that I do very important work, they took it down. And I'm sure this was all the attorneys. But I can't understand how a venerated publication like Psychology Today could take the side of people that are so abusive, so bullying, and so misogynistic. I wrote them. I cut out 2 or 3 paragraphs of truly disgusting things that they wrote about me. And I said to Psychology Today, this is the side you're taking. Do you understand that? They don't care. And I don't know what the issue is, but anyway, that's the story. Part of my issue with that is that I did a lot of really high profile, very well trafficked articles on Psychology Today, introduce my work on abusive relationships, on getting out of abusive relationships, on dealing with the personality disorder in the legal system. A lot of things that a lot of therapists, people that write for Psychology Today, really can't speak to because either they haven't been there personally or they're not an attorney. So they took away this platform, and the platform that I had was one that I cared about. I mean, they didn't pay me a lot of money. So my ability to write for Psychology Today was just about visibility so that my articles could get to people who really truly need them. And that's abuse victims and people who are trying to battle the personality disorder in the court system, and either their lawyers don't understand them or they don't have enough money for lawyers or whatever. So this is what Psychology Today took away from people who are very needy, people who really absolutely need to have this information at hand. They took it away from them to side with cyberbullies, misogynistic abusers. And I will try to get all of the information that was once available on Psychology Today back to you. Now, this is one of those things. This is the personality disordered and the legal system. I did a 3-part series for Psychology Today, and I'm really, really saddened by the fact that they chose to take it down in order to side with cyberbullies and abusers. But I'm going to try to get it back to you as much as I can. And this is the podcast. And if you know anybody who is battling a personality disorder person in the legal system, this is part 1. I'm an attorney, I'm an author, I'm a relationship therapist, and I'm a former psychiatric clinician. And former psychiatric clinician does not mean that I got fired. It means that I went to law school. But I can clearly see in my clients, my readers, and now my listeners, the frustration and the despair that comes from trying to deal with and co-parent with the personality disordered ex. Now, when I say personality disordered, I'm talking people that are on the Axis 2 DSM scale. Someone who's a sociopath, a psychopath, or a narcissist. Borderline can be in there, but this is usually not about borderlines. This is usually more about sociopath, psychopath, narcissist. And people do not have to be technically diagnosed, because most of the Axis 2 people, unless they're borderline, who show up frequently in the mental health milieu, are not getting help. So you know, and I know, when we're talking about people like this, they might not be technically diagnosed and they might not even meet all the criteria, but they act so close to it that you can't believe that they're not there. The psychiatric disorder that I'm talking about might include some borderline personalities. I will include abusers here and some Axis 1 diagnoses such as bipolar when it has psychotic features. In most instances, bipolar disorder is a mood disorder and it's not representative of the behaviors that I'm about to talk about. For the record, and in very rare instances, mood disorders can have complications such as psychotic features where the person's in an altered state. Sometimes their psychosis seriously curtails their ability to control their mood disorder, and then they can become very manipulative, extremely self centered, and very irrational. I'm not talking about people with mood disorders such as depression or bipolar without psychotic features. So, this is not about mood disorders. This is about those who are not just defined by the DSM Access to diagnosis, because a lot of people with a true Access to diagnosis are just not going to get diagnosed. So, the way I'm defining this is someone who's extremely unhealthy, toxic, self centered, manipulative, and whose life goal seems to revolve around making other people miserable. And they do it in such a way to portray themselves as a long suffering victim when nothing could be further from the truth. These are extremely manipulative personalities. And when you first come across them, you are fooled. And you can think back on your early days with them because you were once fooled too. So when you are frustrated with people in the legal system or parenting coordinators or family therapists, whoever it is, remember, once upon a time you were fooled too. But one thing that you need to know is that the world of technology and the world of law rarely come together. The legal world is so far behind in technology. People with personality disorders, and I'm calling them PDs, and that is going to encompass all the things I just said, not technically a diagnosis. But PDs use things such as email and text and all these new forms of social media to harass and to harangue. And the courts are so far behind. As I've said before, and I'll say it again, the wheels of justice move slowly. And it is so difficult when you are dealing with these people who could now, thanks to these tools, they can bombard you 24 hours a day and your court hearing is 8 months off. It's absurd. So not only is the speed of the legal system failing those who need to divorce or co-parent with the PD, but legal professionals are failing the families that they're tasked to help by being sucked in by these people. So you're being blasted on two different levels. The court system is too slow to help you. The PD is using every tool imaginable to bother you. And when you try to get something done about this, it seems like no one's listening. When PDs land in social services or in court, I have seen so many unskilled professionals who are assigned to assist high conflict families make the situation worse. My own frustration comes from years in both the psychiatric and the legal fields. In each of these fields, I have witnessed unskilled professionals exacerbating difficult and dangerous situations. When dealing with PDs, it's important that helpers help and not enable. When dealing with PDs, it's important to not be another pawn in the game. When dealing with PDs, it's important to know that one is dealing with a PD. My frustration comes from countless stories over many years across several states from both men and women about parenting coordinators, court-ordered therapists, judges, and attorneys who are fooled by the PDs. The goal of the psychiatric and the legal community should be to protect children and to assist high-conflict families in navigating the waters of custody and visitation. Because I know both the legal system and the psychiatric system, I can see how those who are put into place to help are actually hurting the situation because they fail to recognize the blatant lies, the manipulation, and the control exerted by the PD. This inability to see the PD for what he or she really is hurts everyone, but especially hurts the children, the ones that the system is supposedly designed to help. I see therapists fail miserably. I see attorneys fail miserably. I see parenting coordinators fail miserably. I see so-called social services fail miserably. Many parenting coordinators and social workers are unaware of how sociopaths, psychopaths, and narcissists behave. Mental health training does not usually involve a lot of information in dealing with the personality disordered in an adversarial situation. No one should be working in the family court system without knowing how to recognize and deal with these corrosive, abusive, and manipulative people. Because if you cannot understand how a PD operates, chances are he or she has been operating on you. The PD parent is usually an untreated and most times undiagnosed sociopath, psychopath, or narcissist. Each of these disorders has inherent manipulation and bullying at its core. Even though in the beginning they're going to sound like a helpless victim, oh, poor me, oh, blah, blah, blah. And they will take the person they are abusing and claim that is the abuser. It's not terribly difficult to understand how people who are in the system day in and day out, working in the system day in and day out, get terribly confused because the abusers are blaming the abused as the abusers, and the abused are just standing there like deer in the headlight going, I don't know what to do. But often the non-PD partner has fled the situation, the relationship, in anger, fear, dismay, confusion. A co-therapist friend of mine once said that people who leave a relationship with the personality disordered leave it not knowing whether to shit or go blind. It's a crude saying, but I've not met one non-PD parent who did not nod when I used that expression to describe their state of mind when they had finally had enough. But into the legal system they are thrust. Few people take up as much time, legal resources, mental health resources, and social services as the PD litigant. They're not content to have battled it out and most likely worn down their ex-partner as well as attorneys and judges. They continue to fray the nerves of parenting coordinators, family therapists, and social workers. Drama is their game, and everyone's invited to play. When someone is personality disordered, both in the classic sense and the way they're defined for this podcast, they have no sense of reality. They feel betrayed and wounded, even if it's their disordered behavior which drove their ex-partner out of the relationship. To them, they're the victim. And because they're the victim, the partner must pay forever and ever and ever. They will take their rage and their anger and their angst out on them forever and ever. It's not understandable that they are still angry years and years and years later, which I will get to. But once the courts become involved, it becomes so apparent that the couple needs some oversight. And what the legal system calls this is a high conflict family. The judge will start assigning guardians ad litem, parenting coordinators, social workers, therapists, a whole host of people get involved in this. And to the personality disorder, this is just what they want. An audience, a stage. There is now an audience to which the PD can air the grievances over and over and over again. An audience that will listen to them castigate their partner and show the world what a victim they are and how they have been wronged. They will characterize their ex's behavior and language as abuse, as lies, as terror. They will use language that you cannot believe. And one of the things I have said in classes I have taught to legal professionals is when you're looking for who is the personality disordered here, you look for the person who is constantly focused on the other person's words and behavior and how they're using very extreme language to characterize it. You can't have a different version of events. No, it's lies. You can't show up late. You're abusing them. You're abusing my time. They use very extreme language. They use very explosive language. They use very inflammatory language. And this is why I always tell people when I am counseling them as an attorney how to write an email to a personality disordered ex. You have to come off as the reasonable person. You have to show that if all this stuff goes to a judge, you are the person who is the one who is reasonable. With PDs, there is no slight so small, nor error so minimal that it won't be uncovered and shared with their captive audience of attorneys, judges, family therapists, parenting coordinators, etc. If that's not enough, they'll resort to slanted views, bizarre renditions of their paranoid delusions, and even blatantly made up scenarios. The audience is in for a theatrical rendition so dramatic, so psychologically deep, so fraught with emotion, so dripping with suspense that Shakespeare himself would be jealous. It used to be that PDs who were separating would just call and call and call everyone and anyone, but they can only get people in the court system or in the family law services or in the family therapy services in business hours. But now they have email and now they have texting. They call ad litems, lawyers, judges, court clerks, child protective services, teachers, school nurses, and newspapers. Anyone and everyone who would listen to their tale of woe. But now, in this day and age, they have unfettered access to email, texting, and they will email long diatribes and long written assault on the co parent and copy the entire world on their manifesto. Every single slight or error by the ex partner is excruciatingly detailed and couched in some "I'm saving the children from you" language as the basis for this harangue. Technology has enabled the ballistic bullying nature of the personality disordered quote unquote co-parent. I say quote unquote co-parent because there's no true co-parenting going on here. There can't be. It's a lost cause. And it's the shame of the legal system that it not only refuses to recognize it, but it enables the charade that such a thing is possible. It is not possible. Not now and not ever. The other shame of the legal system is that it fails the non-PD co-parent in a myriad of ways, but allowing this abusive email to be part of the co-parenting narrative is a large part of the failure. Many divorced couples where there's not a PD person, and it could be somebody very, very dysfunctional, but they don't fall under this umbrella. But many divorced couples finalize their divorce and they never again set foot in a courthouse or in a lawyer's office. They parent the children in different ways. They don't agree with what the other one does, but they don't get into each other's business. They don't worry about what's going on. They just practice something of a detente where they're not friends, they're not talking, but they're not battling either. They have come to realize that the way it is just the way it is. They construct their lives and their children's lives with a minimum of conflict and sometimes very different parenting styles. They might not like what the other one does, but they live with it. They may have very unkind words that they say away from the children about their ex, but they live with it. They may wish a hole in the earth would open up and swallow their ex whole, but when that fails to happen, they live with it. No one is terribly happy with the arrangements or the ex's parenting style, but they live with it. They exchange the children for visitation, they grumble about child support, and they communicate when they have to, and only when they have to, in clipped, terse styled, with an undercurrent of exasperation and disdain. There may be occasional disagreements and blow-ups, but for the most part, everyone sucks it up until the children graduate from college, and they don't have to see each other until a wedding or something else rolls around. The courts never hear from them, and they never set foot in the office of a parenting coordinator. That's the way, thank goodness, the majority of people do it. The people who take up the time, energy, and resources of the court are people who are in the high conflict, dire straits situations, which includes the couples where one person is personality disordered. Why? Because the personality disorder demands an audience. No matter what disorder they suffer from, chances are they want witnesses to their victimhood and they want to bully and bluster their way through life. Requiring a parenting plan and a parenting coordinator gives them a magnificent playground and a sometimes clueless playground monitor. The non-PD co-parent feels led to the gallows, and oftentimes that's the exact correct analogy if the parenting coordinator, the social worker, the social services worker, and the therapist either fail to recognize the disorder for what it is or refuse to do what needs to be done. They need to set boundaries and refuse to allow the PD to be the playground bully, getting his or her own way, kicking and screaming and threatening to take the ball and go home. I have seen parenting coordinators actually tell an abused parent, the non-PD, this is not abuse. When the non-PD has submitted to the parenting coordinator a stack full of abusive emails, and the parenting coordinator thinking, I don't know what he was thinking, this is not abuse. No, sweetheart, that was abuse. One name is abusive, but a whole litany of them throughout an email that didn't have to be sent for any reason whatsoever, dredging up year after year after year, laundry list after laundry list of everything you ever did wrong. That's abusive, okay? Let me clue you in. That is abusive. In Getting Past Your Breakup, I detail how to maintain no contact with a co-parent. In the book and in my practice, I always tell co-parent clients, no matter the relationship with the ex, keep the communication as brief and businesslike as possible. I also detail in both of my books how to have and maintain healthy boundaries with everyone from your children to your ex to your boss to the mailman. In a highly charged emotional situation, that is difficult. It takes work, it takes practice, and it's easy in the beginning to be sucked into the mental and emotional games. I have seen non-PDs over and over again just get to the breaking point where they have to tell the PD to suck it. I mean, they just implode one day. They just really like, I can't handle it. After failing a few times, you have to catch on to the fact that brief and business-like communication with a co-parent, no matter who they are, PD or not PD, is best for all involved. And the more you do it, the better life gets. Even if an ex is full of anger, unless they're PD, usually the anger and the bitterness disappears and child visitation and support goes as smoothly as possible. Brief and business-like communication is the method by which healing happens and good co-parenting begins. If you have trouble with this and you don't have a PD co-parent, keep doing it. You can do it. But because PDs are disordered and have agendas that have nothing to do with healthy communication, good co-parenting or anything else is absolutely useless to try to convince them that this is good for all involved. They bluster about caring about the children, but if they cared about the children, they would not behave the way they behave. They would not sap the energy of the co-parent the way they do. They would not characterize everything they do as evil and horrible and wrong. I just read something last night, somebody that I was consulting with, where she had one version of the story, he had another version of the story, but he kept characterizing her version of the story as lies. She never said that his version was a lie. All of his language was inflammatory, all of it. And I will tell you exactly what to do when you are faced with something like that. PDs bluster about caring about the welfare of the children, but they don't care. They're completely incapable about caring about the children's well-being unless they can use the lack of well-being as a bat with which to beat their ex over the head. The issue comes when the PD parents, in an effort to shield themselves from ruthless, pointless attack and a never-ending recitation of past offenses, both real and imagined, attempts to set boundaries and keep communication brief and businesslike. I have another podcast or two on ways to get through the PD circus of craziness. I'm going to end this podcast with a quick summary of how to respond to an email that you get from a PDX. Now, you don't have to respond to every single email. One of the ploys that I've noticed that PDs have been using in the last few years is they want you to be at their beck and call. When I say you, I mean the non-PD co-parent. They want you to be at their beck and call 24 hours a day. So when you say, I only want to use email, they will say, no, I don't check my email's not working, blah, blah, blah. There's 4 million zillion ways to get email. So if Yahoo Mail doesn't work, try something else. If Gmail doesn't work, try something else. If you've already said to the PD co-parent, I'm only using email to talk to you, then that's it. Do block them from text. Do not talk to them on the phone. It's best to have everything documented, and it's best to have it in email. Now, I'll tell you exactly how to deal with them and their characterization of whatever. Well, first of all, I want you to sit down. If you tell them something once, like I'm only dealing with you in email, because they will push back on that and push back on that and push back on that. I've seen it over and over again. You say it once, and then every time they bring it up, you say, I've already addressed this. I'm not going to do it again. When you sit down to write an email, you're not writing to your ex. You're writing to the judge. You're writing to the parenting coordinator. You're writing to the therapist. You're writing to the attorney. You want to come across as the most reasonable person on the face of the earth. When a judge is looking through things, they've got a million, zillion things. You can't reference the PD's email and the judge has no idea what it is you're talking about. Maybe the PD knows what you're talking about, but the judge doesn't. Remember, when you write an email, it's being written for the judge, not for the PD. So one, you always start off with a soft introductory paragraph as to why you're sending this email. Now, the person that I was talking to last night, and that's the reason that I thought about doing this podcast, the person that I was talking to last night felt that the accusations that the ex was making in the email had to do with school stuff, it had to do with custody stuff, it had to do with child safety stuff. She really felt like it had to be addressed. Not every email from a PD needs to be addressed. So do not do this for every single thing they send. And once you have given your stand on an issue, just refer back. I've addressed this. I'm not addressing this again. But you want to do a very soft, and when I say soft, I mean very reasonable, very nice, very positive introductory paragraph as to why you're sending this email. You want to say something like you're surprised to read their email about blah, 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 because that didn't seem to be what you agreed about last time, etc. You want to do a short summary of what it is you're responding to. You want to do it in a nice positive tone so it sets the stage for the judge. You want to walk a judge through your stuff, and most family law judges just listen to angry nonsense day in and day out. The more pleasant you start, the better. Remember, this is about the judge. It's not about the PD. Then number the paragraphs. It has to be easy reference for a judge. Do number 1 point. Make sure, give it to a friend of yours, say, do you know what I'm talking about? You are responding to something they say, not an accusatory thing, not a name calling thing. We'll get to that later, but an actual fact. In this particular instance, this person had received an email from her ex that said that she took the child out of school against the divorce decree, and that was something they never agreed to do. And yet she had 2 previous emails of his where he was taking the child out of school, and he was actually thanking her for being so reasonable about it. Plus, it had never been in the divorce decree. So her first paragraph was, I'm really surprised to hear that you feel this way because, and then she said, on this day you said this, and on this day you said that. So make sure that that paragraph, that opening paragraph, makes sense. This person said this, and you're responding this way. And then if there's something else, like in this person's situation, they also had an email from the teacher where the teacher was basically saying nobody was going to be in school that day, where the person who was having the fit about this thought that the child was missing out on so much when the teacher was basically saying nobody's going to be there. So she said in the nicest way possible, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but I think it might help you to feel better about him missing school if you understand that his teacher sent this email, and then she cut and pasted the teacher's email in there. Then the next thing she said was, this is like bullet point point number 3. In your most recent letter, you said this is against our decree. Please reference the page and paragraph for me. This is a surprise to me in light of your remarks above. And then she quoted the 2 emails where he had said that he wanted to take him out of school. And then there was this bit where he insinuated that the child got sick on her watch the last time, therefore it was her fault. So what I said to her was just quote basically what he said so that you can sound like the more reasonable person. And then I said, okay, now quote some of the things he said about you. Always talk in I language, and I'll go into this more in future podcasts, but I say it in almost all of my materials, in the books, in the workbook. Speak in I language. It's not only difficult for people to argue with I language, I think, but it also keeps you from going you, because people get defensive when you say you. You can now at this point pull out some of the things that they have said that's very inflammatory, very unfair, and say something very reasonable like, I feel unable to discuss things with you in a reasonable manner if you continuously characterize my version of events as lies and make erroneous assumptions about my motivations. I feel it is best for our son that we keep personal attacks and unfair characteristics and a laundry list of past offenses out of present day discussions. We may have differing views of events, but that does not make mine a lie. Please refrain from these characterizations. They are unhelpful and fail to assist in our co-parenting of our child. And I know, and I said this to her, you might want to gag on that last part, but you are writing this for the judge, not for the wacko on the other end. So that is installment number 1. And again, I apologize that Psychology Today has decided to side with the cyberbullies and keep the platform away from people who really need it. I hope this was helpful, and I have a few more installments of this, so stay tuned. And if you have any questions, please let me know because I will include it in future podcasts. Take care, everybody. Thanks so much. Talk to you soon.